Welcome to Preparing for a School Nutrition Program Administrative Review Part 2. During this training, we'll discuss the Nutrition Quality, Meal Pattern, and Resource Management Review sections to assist sponsors in being successful during their administrative review and every day. Each sponsor has an administrative review once every 3-year review cycle, which includes both off-site and on-site activities. The administrative review is designed to ensure program integrity and compliance with the federal law and regulations in the operation of the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone of a few key points. These are terms used throughout this presentation. Sponsor, that's you, is the word we use for any organization that is operating or sponsoring a federal nutrition program. This could be a public school district, a private school, a charter school, or a residential child care institution. You are all sponsors. ODE-CNP, that's us, is the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs. We are here to help support you in your work, providing nutritious meals to the students you serve. We recognize that the legislation, regulations, guidance manuals, memos, and forms that USDA and ODE-CNP provide for you can sometimes be challenging to understand. We are here to help you navigate our webpage, find a form, understand a regulation, or answer questions to help you do your work. Please don't hesitate to ask questions at any time. The sponsor specialist list for the state is posted on our webpage, or each sponsor can find their assigned specialist in CNP Web on the Packet tab heading. This slide shows the structure of the administrative review. In the first session, we talked about access and reimbursement. In this session, we are discussing how nutritional quality and meal pattern are evaluated during the administrative review. As with the other areas of review, ODE-CNP will request documentation before the on-site review. Approximately 6 weeks before the on-site visit, menu planning documentation will be requested for the review week from each site being reviewed. If there are unannounced sites during your on-site visit, the document will be requested when we're on-site. The menu planning documentation you provide is used to complete a menu evaluation tool. In many cases, someone from ODE-CNP will contact you for additional details in order to complete that evaluation tool. The documents are menus for both breakfast and lunch for each grade group, including pre-K, served at all review sites. Production records for breakfast and lunch. Within the production records, portion sizes for meal components will be evaluated, as well as all other meal pattern requirements. If the review of menu planning documentation reveals errors, such as missing components or insufficient quantities, documentation may be requested for dates beyond the review week. The review of meal components and food quantities will include both a week during the review month and the day of on-site review. Typically, the review month is a recent month from which a claim for reimbursement has been submitted through CNP Web. On-site, the assigned specialist will review menu planning documentation, including production records for the day of on-site review. Crediting documentation, including food labels, product formulation statements, CN labels, and standardized recipes for the week of review and day of on-site review. This information will be used to determine if the planned menus and meals served are in compliance with the meal pattern requirements. Here's an example of a production record. This may look different than production records that you're using, and that's okay, as long as the record being used has the required items. Remember to include things such as food component, food item, how the food credits to the meal pattern, and portion size. Ensure that daily vegetable and weekly vegetable subgroup portions are being met. Make sure that there is an area to indicate the number of reimbursable meals served, as well as non-reimbursable meals, such as adult meals or second meals. Remember to list the number of servings that you have offered and actually served to students, and include the number left over. The next few slides show examples of documentation needed for the nutritional quality and meal patterns section. On-site, the reviewing specialist will ask to see nutrition facts labels for grain items used in your school meal program. The label should include the weight of the item per serving, as well as the nutrition breakdown and ingredients of the product. For in-house made or assembled items, you will need either a standardized recipe or to list the individual items on the production record. The recipe should include what ingredients are needed to prepare a menu item, how the menu item is prepared, and how the recipe credits to the meal pattern. If the item is listed on the production record, such as a hamburger, all components must be listed individually with crediting documentation for both the hamburger patty and bun available. Specialists are looking for standardization in recipes, production records, and meal service to ensure consistency. If a child nutrition label, known as a CN label, is used to credit menu items such as the one shown here, the assigned specialist will look at this documentation while on site. CN labels are only found on products that include the meat alternate component. As you can see in this example, a valid CN label is clearly indicated by a box with the letter CN on each side and states the weight of the product per serving, the ounce equivalents of meat alternate, and any other creditable meal components, in this case grains. A CN label is applied for and is reviewed and authorized by USDA's Food Nutrition Service and is optional for manufacturers, so not all items will have one. A crediting statement on a label that doesn't include the CN outline is not a CN label and will need alternate crediting documentation. In the past, only original CN labels, usually cut from and including part of the box, were only accepted CN labels. Now, ODE can accept the actual label, a photo of the label on the box, or a publicly available copy of the CN label, for instance, from the manufacturer's website, with an invoice showing that this is the exact item purchased. Another document that may be requested is the Manufacturer's Product Formulation Statement, or MPFS. This is a document completed by the manufacturer of a product, attesting to the fact that their product credits for a certain amount of a particular component based on crediting requirements of the USDA guidelines. This example is for a grain product, whole wheat hoagie buns by the Kroger Company. These statements must be signed and dated by the manufacturer's representative and must be accompanied by the product's nutrition facts label and ingredient list, and include the method used to determine crediting. On the day of review, all review sites will be assessed for compliance with the meal pattern requirements for the age grade group or groups served at that site. The purpose of this portion of the review is to determine if all sites plan, prepare, offer, and serve meals to students that meet the meal pattern requirements for the appropriate age grade groups, and that every meal service line meets the daily meal pattern requirements for the appropriate age grade group being served. This includes meeting the correct meal pattern requirements if more than one grade group is being served at a single site and at self-service stations, including salad bars or variety bars. Part of evaluating meal components and quantities requires observing the meals. Meal observations are required for lunch at all review sites and breakfast for at least half of the sites. For example, if there are 3 review sites, 3 lunches and 2 breakfasts will be observed. On the day of review, the reviewing specialist will observe meal preparation prior to meal service. During the observation, the specialist will assess if standardized recipes are being followed when meals are prepared. If multiple grade groups are being served at one site, the specialist will examine how staff are meeting each grade group's meal pattern requirements. Before meal service begins, all service lines are reviewed to ensure that all the meal components and food items in the required minimum quantities are available on each reimbursable meal service line. If a missing meal component is identified prior to the beginning of the meal service, the specialist will notify sponsor staff to give them the opportunity to correct it prior to meal service. However, even if corrected prior to meal service, the missing component will be reported in the document of administrative findings, provided after the on-site review is complete. During meal service, the reviewing specialist will observe whether or not students are being offered the meal components and food quantities required for the age grade groups, that students demonstrate knowledge of how to select all required meal components in the appropriate quantities in the meal service area, and that staff at each point of service station are recognizing complete and reimbursable meals. Alternate locations of meal service will be reviewed. This includes, but is not limited to, classrooms, detention sites, school buses, kiosks, or any other location outside of the cafeteria area that is serving meals. Menu planning documentation will be reviewed to ensure that all meal components are available and planned in the correct quantities at alternate service sites. The daily and weekly meal pattern requirements must be met, including offering a variety of milk. If non-compliance is observed, all other alternate meal locations are subject to review. Fiscal action could result from findings in the meal components and quantities area of review for missing meal components, missing production records, or certain repeat findings. An example of a missing meal component would be if no vegetable is offered for lunch. When a sponsor has a repeat finding in the areas of dietary specifications, vegetable subgroups, milk variety or unallowable milk type, insufficient quantities, or for not serving whole grain-rich items, fiscal action may be taken. An example of when fiscal action may be taken for a repeat finding is if the sponsor had a review in 2014-15 with a finding for not serving the dark green vegetable subgroup during the week. In the review this year, the sponsor has a finding for not serving the red-orange vegetable subgroup during the week. This is a repeat finding for vegetable subgroups and may result in fiscal action of all the meals served in the week being disallowed. When determining offer versus serve compliance, the reviewing specialist will look for the following: that the school is offering all meal components on all reimbursable meal service lines, that signage is posted at or near the beginning of the service line that will assist students in easily identifying a reimbursable meal, that students are selecting enough components or items in the proper quantities to make a reimbursable meal, that food service staff members are accurately judging quantities of students' selections on self-serve bars in order to recognize what is a reimbursable meal, and that the point of service staff members at the point of service are trained and can accurately recognize a reimbursable meal, including appropriate quantities. Offer versus serve is optional at alternate meal service locations, which include any service area that is not in the cafeteria. Signage is a requirement for breakfast and lunch. Here are examples of what some Oregon sponsors have done to meet this requirement. Please ensure that this is in place at all serving lines at all sites for both breakfast and lunch. The signage must inform students what makes up a full meal and how many items they must select for a reimbursable meal under offer versus serve. Under offer versus serve, the instruction to select a minimum of a half a cup of fruit at breakfast and a half a cup of fruit and/or vegetable at lunch must be included in the signage. This means that at lunch in a K-8 site, students need to know that they could have 3/4 a cup of vegetable and a half a cup of fruit, but the minimum selection must be a half a cup of fruit and/or vegetable. For offer versus serve, fiscal action could occur for the following reasons. If the meal is missing a component, for example, there are no grain items offered for breakfast or lunch. If meals selected by students are counted as reimbursable at the point of service when they contain fewer than 3 different food components at lunch or food items at breakfast. Or if fruits and vegetables are offered but the serving taken by students is less than the required half cup and the deficient quantity is not corrected at the point of service. This meal is an incomplete meal and not eligible for reimbursement. Fiscal action will occur if students are allowed to repeatedly take meals with insufficient quantities of fruits and/or vegetables. The dietary specifications and nutrient analysis review process begins before the on-site review. A dietary specification assessment will be completed by the reviewing specialist to determine if the food products and preparation methods used by the sponsor are consistent with practices that yield menus that are in compliance with the dietary specifications. The assessment is one tool that will be completed by the specialist to determine if the sponsor's menu will require a nutrient analysis. The menu documentation provided by the sponsor before the review must be accurate and consistent with on-site observations on the day of review. During the on-site review, the specialist will assess whether the production records are completed accurately, whether standardized recipes are used, and if crediting documentation is provided. If the meal pattern requirements are not met, corrective action must take place to ensure menus are in compliance and a nutrient analysis is required. This portion of the administrative review uses a risk-based approach. With this approach, if a sponsor demonstrates that their menus are in compliance with the meal pattern standards, then a nutrient analysis may not be required. There are several scenarios when a nutrient analysis will be required. 1, if the off-site portion of the dietary specifications assessment determines that the site is at high risk for not meeting dietary specifications. 2, if the on-site portion of the dietary specifications determines that the site is at high risk for not meeting dietary specifications. Or 3, if menu noncompliance is observed during the on-site review. To conduct an accurate nutrient analysis, the review week's menu must meet the meal pattern. If the menu does not meet meal pattern, the sponsor must first correct the menu. The nutrient analysis will be completed on the menu items offered to students, not based on planned amounts. If it is determined that a nutrient analysis is required, the reviewing specialist will complete a weighted nutrient analysis on 1 week's menus for breakfast and lunch at one site. The dietary specifications that will be included in the nutrient analysis are calories, saturated fat, sodium, and trans fat. Some of the common findings in the Nutritional Quality and Meal Patterns section of the Administrative Review include that the menu for the week of review did not meet the meal pattern standards, grain items served were not whole grain rich, and that menus that had a nutrient analysis performed did not meet the dietary specifications. It is important for sponsor staff to understand how to credit food items to ensure that menus meet the meal pattern and dietary specification standards. Training for CN labels, meal documentation, production records, crediting for each meal component, offer versus serve, and point of service are all available on the School Nutrition Program training page. More information about menu planning and production records are found on the School Nutrition Program's webpage at the ODE CNP site. This includes production record templates and the list of required elements. In this section, we will be discussing how resource management is evaluated during the administrative review. As we're all aware, the financial pressures on sponsors are numerous and significant. Sponsors must provide nutritious, well-balanced meals in an efficient and effective manner to all students. Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs is required by regulation to evaluate the overall financial health of sponsors' nonprofit school food service during the resource management section of the administrative review. The goal is to ensure effective, efficient, and consistent management of the program resources, while maintaining a system that documents all revenues and expenses of the nonprofit school food service account. The School Nutrition Program team's financial specialist will provide technical assistance during this process to help sponsors manage their food service resources effectively to deliver maximum benefits to students. Resource management includes maintenance of a nonprofit school food service account, paid lunch equity, revenue from non-program foods, and indirect costs. Information about the sponsor's current resource management policies and procedures are collected on the off-site assessment tool, which every sponsor receives, completes, and returns in advance of their on-site review. The answers to these questions and known factors are entered into a resource management risk indicator tool by ODE-C&P. This tool is used to identify situations that may result in noncompliance. If an area is identified as at risk in any of the 4 modules in the resource management section, the ODE financial specialist will conduct a comprehensive resource management review of each module in which a risk flag was identified. If the sponsor does not provide the completed resource management portion of the off-site assessment tool to ODE-C&P, a comprehensive resource management review of all 4 areas must be conducted. Additionally, a comprehensive resource management review may be conducted of any module if ODE determines that further review is warranted. Any required resource management review modules will be completed as a separate process from the on-site administrative review. This section of the review will be completed remotely, and the school nutrition team's financial specialist will contact sponsors and request documentation as needed. Submitting of requested documents and any corrective action is needed to close the administrative review and remain in compliance. If resource management is not part of your job duties, please let us know with whom in your organization we need to be working. If the USDA Resource Management Risk Indicator tool shows that a comprehensive resource management review is required of 1 or more modules, then ODE-C&P must request information and documents necessary to address the comprehensive resource management review questions provided by USDA, including but not limited to statements of revenues and expenditures and general ledgers. ODE staff may determine that additional information or documentation is necessary to adequately address the comprehensive review questions and determine whether the sponsor is in compliance with federal regulations and requirements pertaining to resource management. The detailed review will require the assigned specialist to delve deeper into the sponsor's resource management processes to identify violations and opportunities for improvements. Corrective action is required, and technical assistance may be provided for any resource management areas in which the sponsor is found to be non-compliant. Program payments may be withheld in whole or in part until the sponsor implements sufficient corrective action. Now let's go into more detail of areas that will be reviewed. The first module is Maintenance of the Nonprofit School Food Service Account. What is the Nonprofit Food Service Account? It's the account in which sponsors must deposit their federal meal reimbursements, state reimbursements for reduced price lunches and breakfasts, and revenues from non-program foods. It's the same account from which food service invoices are paid. Why do we require sponsors to maintain a nonprofit school food service? The purpose of this key structure is to ensure that program funds are used only for the operation and improvement of school food service. Removing for-profit motives from program operations maximizes program benefits and helps sponsors to use the limited funding resources for the improvement of school meals. The nonprofit status of the food service account is achieved by limiting net cash resources. The annual balance of the account must not exceed 3 months' operating expenses. If the sponsor is not in compliance with the net cash resources requirements and allows its net cash resources to accumulate excessively, ODE-C&P must provide technical assistance and require corrective action, which includes investing those excess funds back into the school food service. A risk factor in the area of nonprofit school food service accounts will be assigned for any of the following. The sponsor did not have a separate financial account designated for the nonprofit school food service. Year-end review of revenues and expenses was not conducted. Year-end expenses were in excess of revenues. Funds transferred out of the food service account were for other operations. Failure to measure if net cash resources remain below 3 months' average expenses. In Oregon, this is accomplished with the excess operating balance report. and failure to maintain records documenting compliance with 3 months net cash resource limit. The second area is paid lunch equity, also known as the PLE. Prior to the passage of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, there were no statutory or regulatory requirements for sponsors in establishing prices charged to paid rate students for reimbursable meals. USDA's research has shown that the revenue received by schools for paid meals is often too low to cover the cost of those meals, effectively shifting federal subsidies designed for the lowest income children to less needy students. Requiring sponsors to price paid meals at an amount that covers their costs will help ensure that over time the appropriate additional revenues are provided to the nonprofit school food service account, which will benefit all students, regardless of income. A risk factor in the area of paid lunch equity will be assigned for any of the following: either not using the USDA paid lunch equity tool or not charging the weighted minimum average paid lunch price, using non-federal funds to support paid lunch prices, receiving an exemption to the PLE requirement, and not increasing paid lunch prices if the paid lunch equity tool indicated an increase in its paid lunch price was required. The third area is revenue from non-program foods. Section 206 of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act requires that with the exception of food for reimbursable meals, all food sold in a school and purchased with funds from the nonprofit food service account, such as catering, a la carte, or adult meals, must generate a proportion of the revenue at least equal to the proportion of costs of such foods. The Act also requires that all revenues from the sale of non-program foods accrue to the school's nonprofit school food service account. This does not include purchases on behalf of non-food service organizations or departments that are invoiced for those items. For example, the food service purchases coffee for the break room, and the PTO reimburses the food service for that purchase. Requiring sponsors to secure sufficient revenues from the sale of non-program foods to cover their costs will help ensure that federal and state dollars designated for supporting student meals aren't used to fund other food purchases, such as non-reimbursable adult meals. A risk factor in the area of revenue from non-program foods will be assigned for the following. If a sponsor sells non-program foods, this area is considered at risk. This automatically generates a comprehensive resource management review of the revenue from non-program foods area. Now we'll move on to the fourth area, indirect costs. Understanding indirect costs and applying them correctly is important in order to safeguard the limited funds of the nonprofit school food service account. Indirect costs are those expenses that benefit multiple programs. They cannot be readily identified with a particular program or other cost objective and therefore cannot be 100% a food service expense. ODE approves indirect cost rates for sponsors to use to determine what percentage of those expenses can be attributed to the nonprofit school food service account. In 2011, USDA issued the Indirect Cost Guidance Manual and Guidance Memo to provide sponsors more information to ensure the nonprofit school food service account funds are limited to those expenses that are reasonable and necessary to provide quality meals for the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. A risk indicator in the area of indirect costs will be assigned for the following. If a sponsor charges the food service account for indirect costs, this area is considered at risk. This automatically generates a comprehensive resource management review of the indirect cost area. Documentation may be requested to show the approved indirect cost rate, details of the items included, indirect cost rates applied to other departments, and proof that the approved rate is being paid correctly. Technical assistance will be provided and corrective actions may be required for findings in the reviewed areas of resource management, even if a full comprehensive resource management review is not conducted. As a reminder, training is available on the school nutrition training page for paid lunch equity, revenue from non-program foods, and financial regulations. Here are links to resources to assist you in the area of resource management. If you have any questions, please contact your assigned specialist for more information. Thank you for participating in preparing for an Administrative Review Part 2 for the National School Lunch Program. If you have any questions, again, please contact your assigned child nutrition specialist. We greatly appreciate all of the work that you do to fuel Oregon's future.